Tánaiste, the woman was charged in court yesterday with the crime of assisting the suicide of a multiple sclerosis sufferer. The charge comes under Section 2 of the 1993 Criminal Law Act, and it carries a penalty of up to 14 years in prison. This was the first court case of its kind in Ireland, and the case is being watched very closely by a constituent of mine, Marie Fleming. Marie has lived with multiple sclerosis herself for 35 years. Now, as you know, Tánaiste, earlier this year, Marie and her partner, Tom Curran, went to the Supreme Court to challenge the constitutionality of the 1993 Act. And the court did not find it to be unconstitutional, but in the judgment the following was said: nothing should be taken as necessarily implying that it would not be open to the state, in the event that the Oireachtas was satisfied that measures with appropriate safeguards could be introduced, to legislate to deal with a case such as the appellant. So what of the appellant? I spoke with Tom this morning, Tánaiste, and he said that Marie's condition has worsened since the Supreme Court case. He told me that Marie is now completely immobile, other than her mouth. He told me that Marie is in constant pain, and the last time they tried to adjust her pain medication to deal with the increase in pain, she lapsed into a coma. So they can't do that anymore. Marie's ability to swallow is getting worse, making it increasingly difficult for her to eat. Tom said, Tánaiste, that Marie wants to live and that she has a lot of reasons to live. But her ability to eat may deteriorate, and Marie has said that she is adamant she won't use artificial feeding. In that case, under the current legislation, Marie Fleming would starve to death. I asked Tom this morning what question Marie would put to you, and I think indeed to all of us in the Oireachtas. And he told me that she would ask us the following: come and live my life for 24 hours and see if you think helping me to die should be a crime. Come and spend 24 hours in my house and see what you think. He said Marie would ask for all of us to protect her family, that she would ask us in the Oireachtas to change the law so that she could die on her own terms without the threat of Tom Curran spending 14 years in prison. When I raised this with Minister Shatter earlier this year, Tánaiste, he told me that the government would not consider changing the law as he is obliged to have regard to the wider public interest. So my question, Tánaiste, is a very simple one. Do you, as Tánaiste, believe that Tom Curran, Marie's partner, should face the threat, as is the case under current legislation, of 14 years in prison for assisting Marie to die if she so chooses in the future? Thank you.
Tánaiste.
Well, first of all, I'm conscious that there is a case currently before the courts in relation to what is known as assisted suicide. And you'll appreciate that while that case is before the courts, I cannot comment on that case, nor indeed do I think any member of the House should comment on it. I also think that perhaps it is best that that case concludes before, as legislators, we have a discussion here on the issue of assisted suicide. I met with Tom Curran after the Marie Fleming case. It is my view, you asked me a straight question, it is my view that as legislators we should address this issue here in this House. I think it's a difficult issue. I have enormous sympathy for the situation that Tom and Marie find themselves in. But, you know, there is no simple answer to this. This is, you know, when we come to look at this issue in terms of legislation, this isn't going to be a simple, straightforward issue. There are a range of ethical, of legal, of all kinds of issues that are associated with this topic. And I think that this is a topic that I think we should address as legislators, collectively. You know, I don't think that this should be a kind of a government opposition type of issue. I think it's a topic that we should address, first of all, as human beings, as legislators. I think we should approach it putting ourselves in the situation that Tom and Marie are in. And I think we should address it very, very honestly. And I think we should also address it, because I think the area of assisted suicide, there's the issue of what is then opened up in a situation where what is now known as assisted suicide is legislated for. And they're obviously some of the considerations, and you mentioned the Minister for Justice responded to it. They're obviously considerations that the Minister for Justice and his department will inevitably, and legal advice will inevitably have on it. But I do think it is something that we need to address. I think perhaps if I could make a suggestion on it, I think that once the present court case is over, I think that we should find a way collectively, maybe through one of the Oireachtas committees, of having this issue dealt with in a non-partisan way. It is an issue, I think, that does require to be dealt with legislatively. We've seen the Supreme Court judgment, and I read the Supreme Court judgment. I read it at the time that I met with Tom. But the straight answer to your question, Deputy Donnelly, is yes, I do think we should deal with this as legislators.
Donnelly.
Thank you, Tánaiste. And I would like to say I agree. I think with virtually everything you said, it is a complex issue, and it is something that the Oireachtas needs to address. Tánaiste, you're very familiar with the case. You'll know that both Tom and Marie have asked that guidelines be put in place, issued by the DPP, probably with guidance and potentially legislative backup from the Oireachtas, so that the DPP can provide guidance on what is considered a qualifying case where a penalty would not apply. Now, the UK DPP has such guidelines already in place, and I believe we need them here very quickly. I agree we can't talk about the current case. I do think, however, Tánaiste, that we should be able to debate this while the current case is going on. We've no idea how long this is going to take. It's the first case of its kind in the country. It could take a very long time. And I would hate, as I'm sure you would, to have to meet anyone in Tom Curran's situation and explain that we weren't able to change the law in time. So could I ask you to consider this? As a reasonable input to any Oireachtas debate, an expert report may be very useful. It seems to me that an expert report could be concluded quickly and could be done in a way that did not interfere with the current case before the courts. So can I ask you to consider if you would commission an expert report to be concluded reasonably quickly, which we in the Oireachtas could then use as input to a debate to changing the legislation on this as soon as possible. Thank you.
I just remind members that under Standing Order 57, there is an obligation to refrain from comment which might affect proceedings in progress.
Thank you, Ceann Comhairle. Well, as I've said, we can't discuss the case that is in progress. You've mentioned guidelines that the DPP might operate. The DPP is entirely independent, and we respect that independence. You've made a suggestion of that perhaps a way should be found to, have an expert report compiled on this issue. I think that's a very positive suggestion, and it's one that I'll discuss with my colleagues in government.
Thank you.